Hey guys, how's it going today? So, what I want to cover today is why I think learning a language from your girlfriend, boyfriend or partner is a bad idea. Because I've got quite a lot of things to say, I'm going to try and keep it somewhat structured. So first of all, I'm going to go over the scope of what I meant by my first statement, why I think it's a bad idea, and then what I think you can do if you want to learn your partner's girlfriend, and then just try to briefly summarize. The scope of what I'm talking about today is basically people that try to solely learn a language from their partner, or at least the majority of their learning they think should come from their partner. So I'm not referring to people who do a lot of independent study and then use their partner for practice on top of that, or do a lot of independent study and use a partner to ask questions or anything like that. I'm referring to people who solely learn a language through their partner and think all they have to do is speak to their boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever, and they will get fluent. Why do I think this is a bad idea? Well, first of all, I think just to think about this logically, so if you're dating a person, normally the language you start off with is going to be the one you're most comfortable with, and just by default that is going to be the one you spend most of your time in, unless you make a conscious effort otherwise. So I'm going to take myself for example as a native English speaker. If I was, for example, learning Spanish, if I was dating a native Spanish speaker, if they could speak good English, then we would be in a position, so if they could speak good English, then we'd establish a relationship in English and therefore wouldn't be using Spanish. If they couldn't speak English, then we probably wouldn't have much basis to form a relationship at all, unless I had some sort of Spanish already, and then that's not learning for your girlfriend or boyfriend or partner. So in the context of, say, if I'm dating a Spaniard, I am a native English speaker, they speak already good English, and we have a relationship established in English, and then I try to use all of my time with that person to practice Spanish. Well, is that a good idea? I don't think so, because first of all, I think it puts an awful lot of strain on the relationship. So at least if you're anything like me, then language learning is very much a secondary thing, and the primary concern is the relationship. You want to be with that person, you want to enjoy yourself. They don't, at least most people I know, they don't care about teaching you. They just want to hang out, they want to talk to you, they want to find out how your day was, and they just want to be in a relationship. Their primary concern is not teaching you the language. So I think this puts an awful lot of strain on the relationship, because you're putting a role on that person that they didn't initially agree for, and you're just trying to use them for your personal gain. And this point number two, I think if this is the way you're going about it, is really not very proactive. And this is exactly the same problem that a lot of people have. In general, they turn up to class 3 times a week and say, right, I'm going to class, teacher, teach me. And just in that mindset alone, you're putting the onus on somebody else to teach you, and you're waiting to be taught. And if you have this sort of attitude, you're never going to learn, regardless of if it's a professional teacher or your girlfriend or boyfriend or your friends. It's just not going to happen. You need to put the emphasis on yourself. You need to take responsibility, accountability, and you actually need to do something and be proactive. So on to my next point. So I think in terms of, say, input at the start, obviously that you'll mostly be like, oh, how do I say X, how do I say Y, or you just be trying to listen to them, and they'll be trying to speak in simple or broken Spanish or Chinese or whatever to you, and you're going to be getting all of your input from a single person. Why do I think this is bad? Well, first of all, if you rely on one single person or one single source as your input, especially if 99% of the time you default to English because that's what you're used to, it's going to take an absolute lifetime to learn a language, because you just won't get enough exposure. On top of that, only speaking to one person, you won't get the range of styles of speech, you won't get used to different structures, different words that people use, because people tend to use the same sorts of phraseology for things they say, and it differs from person to person, from region to region. And if you might get used to, say, your girlfriend, for example, how they speak, but it doesn't necessarily mean you'll be used to all native speakers. So I think you'll take a big hit on listening comprehension, and that's also to do with stuff like flow and rhythm and things like that as well. Accent. On a side note, if I'm a guy and I'm using my girlfriend to learn Spanish, or Cantonese, then you could pick up lots of feminine ways to phrase stuff. You can add certain, for example, in Chinese, you can add like certain particles that may sound girly, like "oh, yan wei le," or something like that, and it just kind of sounds a bit feminine or camp to a native speaker, because that's normally how girls phrase things. So if you're a guy, you could learn all of your input based on how girls speak, and then you could end up sounding very feminine in that language. It's not a game breaker, but it could be something to watch out. And on top of that as well, if you're only speaking to one person and you're only getting your input from one person, then that means you're not reading any books. And this in itself, not reading, is enough to seriously cut down any vocabulary you would develop in the language, because reading is by far the best way to learn new words, the best way to come across new words and to increase your vocabulary. I think, as far as I know, some research shows in linguistics that the average range of vocabulary, or the average native speaker, uses roughly 10% of their vocabulary when speaking. And if you take, for example, novels and contrast it with that, I'm not sure what the percentage is, but the range of vocabulary used is so much higher that you're going to be having a lot more opportunities to pick up rare and obscure language that you just wouldn't get to pick up if you were just relying on listening, especially just to one person. And the final point I want to make is that if you're learning it from one person, you might learn a bit about, that person, learn bits or tidbits of the culture through that person, but not being exposed to a range of TV shows, books and media from the language. I really think you're going to be lacking a certain amount of just general understanding of how that country works, how that culture works, and all the other things. And I think it's going to be very much, even if you do somehow manage to acquire language to a high level, I think it's going to be a very sort of hollow language, because you won't understand anything behind how native speakers think, what sort of TV shows they watch, what sort of music they listen to, and things like that. And at least in my experience, when I'm speaking to native speakers it was happening with Cantonese and Spanish, the fact that I could be like, for example, oh yeah, I recently watched the Cortina del Mar, I recently watched the Casa de Papel, it was really good. Oh yeah, Cali 13's sick, I really like Beyond, Gem, all that sort of stuff. It really gives you a context, and it gives you a lot more to talk about with native speakers. And I think understanding these cultural insights is a huge, not only does it give you more to talk about with people and make it easier to connect on a personal level, but I think if you get put into a group of native speakers, they will talk about these things, and if you don't know these, then you will get completely lost in the references. So that's another potential reason I think it won't work. So now I've talked about why I think it's a bad idea to learn solely from your partner. Then what do I think you should do? So I think there are a lot of benefits to having a girlfriend/boyfriend or partner that speaks your target language, or that you're learning because you're dating that person. And the number one thing in my experience is motivation, because it really does make you feel like, at least for me, the other half of my partner's, or in my case my girlfriend's, world that I'm just not aware of, and being able to learn that through the medium of language, I really feel like I can understand her better, understand her culture better, understand her history better, and just more about her in general. And I think that's very good for the relationship, and it's also very, very motivating, and it also means it's more invested on a personal level, and this can positively influence memory, because emotions strongly influence our memory. The more emotional we are about something, the more it sticks in our head. So that can help even just remembering new vocabulary as well. So how would I actually do it? The first and the most important thing is that I put the responsibility, the onus on myself as the learner. I think no one's going to teach you the language, and this applies not just for your girlfriend, the same with your teacher. Like I said before, you or yourself have to learn. No one can teach you. People can provide you with tools, with help, with resource suggestions, but you have to learn yourself, and no one can do that for you. So that is the first thing. So provided that I'm putting the responsibility on myself, I'm getting a lot of input, I'm starting to immerse, I've got my textbooks or beginner course and I'm going through that, I'm building a base in the language, then I think, apart motivation aside, I think there are a lot of things you can do. So for example, asking them slight questions for grammar, say, oh, I'm not sure about this word order, can you tell me what's right? They normally won't be able to explain it, in my experience, because native speakers don't understand the grammar rules. They just know this is right and that way sounds weird, and I'm exactly the same in English as well. So kind of just saying, oh, this is how I would phrase it, and then you can get used to maybe more natural phraseology and more natural word choice and selection. You can also say, how do you say blank, so you can learn new vocabulary. If you have, say, making flashcards through Anchor like I do, and I don't have any audio for a sentence I was reading and I'm kind of a bit hazy on the pronunciation, you can get them to record audio for a sentence for you. And obviously all of this is in good faith, providing they're willing to help. I think, at least what I like to do mostly is, if I was having regular italki sessions with a teacher online, then I would direct most of my questions to them, because I kind of feel that I'm paying them, that's their job, that I'm free to ask them whatever I want. That's literally what I'm paying them for their time for. And with my girlfriend, who you might not know is a native Cantonese speaker, which is why I was learning Cantonese, then she didn't sign up for that, so I shouldn't force it on her too much. I think odd things here and there are fine, but I think if I try to overdo it, then it would put more strain on the relationship, and I don't think that's a fair thing to do. That's at a very much beginner level. I guess when you get up to a higher level, the chances to practice and speak really do become more abundant. You really can take more advantage of these things. First of all, because you can have more similar conversations like you would in English to Cantonese, so it's less of a strain, it's less of an effort by their part, so they're going to be more willing. So in these situations, at a sort of upper beginner, maybe low intermediate stage, what I like to do was say, if I was with my girlfriend for a whole weekend, I could say, right, well, we're going out for dinner for an hour on Friday night. How about for that 1 hour we speak only Cantonese, and for the rest of the time we can just revert back and just relax. And I think that way, because it's in a certain time box, it doesn't, and it's only a short defined period of time, it doesn't become this constant uphill battle that just never ends, that puts more and more strain on the relationship. So I think putting it in a set time frame like that really, really helps. And the other thing, moving on to probably the intermediate and advanced stages, I think dating a native speaker, they will most likely have lots of native speaker friends. So the good thing about that is, because their lingua franca between them is going to be your target language. So when I go out with my girlfriend and her friends, even though when it's just me and my girlfriend, we're speaking English, with my girlfriend and her friends, obviously they all speak in Cantonese, because that's all their native language. So going out, I can get used to group conversations, get exposed to group conversations. Because you're part of that group environment, I really don't feel like you're putting any extra strain. If anything, it's easier for your girlfriend in that scenario, because she doesn't have to translate for you. So it's great practice, and it's a lot easier. So also going out with their friends in group practice is, at the intermediate stages and above, I think is absolutely fantastic. In summary, most of the reasons why I think it's bad is because simply you're not taking responsibility yourself, you're not putting the onus on yourself, and you're just kind of saying, girlfriend, boyfriend, teach me, and you're just putting all the responsibility on them, which means two things: one, you won't learn, and two, you're going to create a lot more stress and put a lot more strain in the relationship. And summing up in what I think is good, then it's great for motivation. You can ask small questions, but try not to overload it too much, in my opinion. Time boxing is great, saying I'm going to set, say, even as a beginner, half an hour over lunch to speak, and then the rest of the weekend is fine. And at the advanced stage is really just integrating and socialising in her friendship group can be a big help. So that's my take on it, why I think learning a language from your girlfriend or boyfriend is a bad idea. If you have any disagreements with anything I've said, please do leave me a comment. I'm really interested to hear what you say. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.